All right. Hello and welcome again to another episode of Letter of Law Interviews. In the sixth episode of this interview series, I am thrilled, I'm delighted, and I'm very happy to be in conversation with Karan Tripathi. Karan is presently an associate editor with Live Law, and he's also a lawyer. And I'm very happy that we're able to do this. In fact, I reached out to Karan just yesterday, and he agreed to come on the show today. Usually all the guests agree to come at a 2 weeks notice, 1 week notice, but Karan was very kind to do this very quickly. So thank you so much, Karan, and thank you for being on the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I don't know how to interpret that by the quickness of the response, but I've always, I think, I was a law student. I was in your place, I think, just a year ago, so I can completely understand the effort and hard work and uh, um, and commitment that goes into organizing something like this. So I think that sort of motivated me to quickly say, yes, let's do it. Let's not postpone it.
Oh,
So
thank you so
thanks for
much.
having me.
Oh, of
Thanks for
course,
having me.
it's my pleasure. So, Karan, before anything else, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you went to law school, your life so far, and just everything in general, and we'll take it from there.
Oh, that's quite tricky. uh, I don't know. I mean, I've always, uh, I've sort of never sat down and reflected as to how would I ever answer that question. But just touching upon the few indicators that you mentioned, one of them being law school. So I went to Symbiosis Law School, Pune, and I graduated in 2019. Um, I was in the 2014 to 2019 batch. Uh, During my course at law school, I specialized in subjects on criminal justice and human rights, and comparative subjects like comparative constitutions, comparative criminal procedure, um, legal writing. So these are the few areas that I sort of uh, I sort of specialized in, although I don't understand the idea of specializations at law schools. We had to take
Yes.
7 subjects. So 7 subjects is really not a specialization, but I made sure that on those 7 subjects, out of them, at least 5 or 6 are on criminal justice and human rights. So just after my graduation, I was actually during the last a few months preceding my graduation, and that was after my final exams. I was working with an additional public prosecutor in the Delhi High Court, and we were handling a lot of POXO matters and NDPS matters. And that sort of introduced me to uh, not only how the state prosecutes these cases, but also how the state investigates these cases, which was a very interesting insight for me because I thought that the job of a police officer or investigating agency is just to sort of present the facts and whatever materials and evidence that they've come across during the investigation in a very impartial manner before the court and let the court decide. Uh, but it was during my work with the additional public prosecutor that I realized that it doesn't happen that way, and the idea of prosecution strategies and the idea of investigating strategies and the politics of law enforcement is very much apparent. And because we were dealing with legislations like POXO and NDPS, where that politics of law enforcement becomes even more apparent, especially in NDPS. So I sort of, as they say in the movies, introduced to the dark side of the law enforcement, and then I had a conversation with myself that do I want to be a participant in all of this, or I said no, I don't want to, and I decided to sort of move towards writing and research, which took me to life law, and I was very happy for life now. And it's a very Cinderella story actually as to how I got into. I always tell people it's a very Cinderella story. So I quit my job and I had nothing else to do, and I was just I was I was embracing unemployment, and so I was like, okay, fine. Like now, what should I do? So I said I'll just do what I'm good at, that is researching and writing. So I kept on. I started researching developments in criminal justice across the world, and I started writing on issues of torture, prisons, death penalty, and I started just dumping my articles on LinkedIn because I couldn't wait for, to get, as you said, as a law student, I couldn't wait to, I was very impatient to get a reply from journals
Right,
or websites and portals that we accept your article for publications. I think
right,
it was this, I couldn't wait for it. I
right.
was quite eager to put my work out there. So I started just dumping my work on LinkedIn, and one day I get an email from the editor of Life Law
Wow.
saying that we've been reading your work. Are you interested in the kind of work that we do? And I said, okay. I mean, yes. And then we had I freelanced for them for like a month. I did freelancing work for them, and then I was taken on board permanently. And then rest is history. I mean, it's been so long, and
Yes.
so that has been my
Wow,
journey so far.
that's quite a lot, and in that that's really wholesome answer. It in fact covered the first few of the questions that I had. So really, really interesting story of how you got into life law. Before we actually start talking more about your professional life and life law, I want to go back to Symbiosis Law School, Pune, or Pune, whatever works. I don't know. A lot of my viewers and my close friends are right now going to law school there. Before we started recording, we were just talking about how you would move around the streets of Pune and enjoy that. So, do you miss it now that you're in Delhi and the air is toxic? You can't possibly step out. Of course, there's a pandemic going. So do you think there's a difference in living between Pune and Delhi?
Oh yes.
That's
Oh
the
yes.
simple answer.
I always tell people I'm a Punekar in exile, and it's yeah. I mean, my heart and soul is in Pune, in every nook and corner of Kalyani Nagar, where I lived for 3 years, and Viman Nagar, where I lived for 2 years, and all my friends. Actually, one of my friends, Subeda, is currently, is in Cambridge. She's doing her LLM from there, and Subeda and I were just chit chatting, so and we are comparing everything in Cambridge to what we had in Pune, and we'll be like, oh my god, this corner looks like this. Oh my god, this place looks like that. So it's only now that I realize how much of my life I live vicariously, trying to sort of recreate what I had in Pune, and I realize that that's not something unique to me. That's been happening to all my friends and who lived with me in Pune. So
Right.
so it's sort of the city not only grows with you, it stays with you. And I think the most beautiful thing about Pune is that if you meet any Punekar and you ask that person like, do you like Pune? And definitely they're gonna say yes. And they're gonna say yes, we do it. Not like we love it. So it's a it's a common sentiment that it's a universal sentiment for Punekars, and I think anyone who's watching this or who's from Pune, they'll realize what I'm talking about and they know where I'm coming from. So yes, I mean
Right.
my heart and soul is in Pune and forever
You,
will
you
be.
spoke it like a true writer. The city not only grows with you, but it stays with you. I was like, oof. Karan, one of the things about legal journalism that has fascinated me always is that in law schools, presently, I don't see any discourse around legal journalism being considered as a viable option. In law schools, most students are either looking for a corporate job, litigation, judiciary, and some academia. So, but do you think this trend is actively changing? And do you think legal journalism is becoming something that law students can actually think of pursuing as a career?
I mean, I don't know whether it's changing as a trend. I haven't talked to a lot of law students as to, I think they're still sort of very much looking forward to a lucrative career in law firms and uh, companies, litigation chambers. I don't know if many of them are looking for litigation chambers, but I think the answer is that, law school requires a lot of monetary investment, uh, regardless to whichever law school you go to. And the sort of environment that we're growing up, where we see education as an investment, as a financial investment that should have financial returns. So that sort of commodification of education has entered the field of law as well. And that sort of reflects in the career decisions that we law students take. Uh, I mean, honestly, legal journalism was not something that I sort of knew that I'm going to do when I was in law school. I was eyeing a career in in policy. I knew that I wanted something where I don't have to wear a uniform. I was very sure about that. I was like, no, I can't wear formals and nothing fits me. I had huge body image issues. I was like, oh my God, I don't look good in formals. I don't want a job where I have to wear formals all the time,
Right.
because I wouldn't just feel confident in formals. So I was very sure that I want a career where at least I have liberty of expressing myself through my clothes.
Right.
So so I was eyeing a career in policy or somewhere I get to write. Somehow, when I graduated, there weren't any openings at policy think tanks, and so I had to sort of work with the state, the public prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
And then live law happened. I realized that live law sort of gave me a platform and the kind of arrangement which I realized was very overwhelming, because I think the very first case that I did when I joined live law was the P. Chidambaram money laundering case,
I see.
which I sort of covered right from the date of his arrest to his judgment, grant of bail from the Supreme Court. Um, so it was quite overwhelming, because I was like, oh my God, what is happening? I didn't even know that we had CBI court in Delhi.
Okay.
And I get a message as like P. Chidambaram getting produced in Rouse Avenue court. And I was like, what is Rouse Avenue? I thought there's only Patiala House, P. Sadari, and like, what is this Rouse
Yes.
Avenue? And it
Yes.
was quite a, and it was, it, and anyone who's been to Rouse Avenue court would say it's a very confusing court. So yeah, I mean, it was very overwhelming, but I think it's only later that and then soon after Chidambaram, I was doing Nirbhaya, JNU, Jamia. So I think Nirbhaya was sort of an eye opener. It it sort of strengthened my conviction towards criminal justice reforms, and the kind of, I think what I realized is that when we talk about reforms, even before talking about structural reforms as to what we can do to change the law and change the procedures, is that we need to first of all disseminate information. We need to sort of create a discourse where people have access to knowledge on criminal justice, and
Right.
this sort of became extremely apparent uh, during Nirbhaya, because the kind of discourse that was going on in the media, the kind of discourse, and because I could see that, right, I was surrounded by journalists from across the spectrum, from across media channels, from NGOs, international NGOs, different stakeholders. Uh, and the conversations were going on inside the court, outside the court, and the clamor was quite apparent. That was the moment I sort of realized that the judicial reasoning is very much amenable and susceptible to public clamor, and the kind of discourse that goes on outside the courtrooms. It's quite susceptible, especially at the level of trial courts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and even in this was an execution proceeding, so trial court could not have actually done it. The role of the trial court there was just to sort of pass a death warrant. But I think even during those proceedings, one could see procedural violations taking place and principles of natural justice being ignored. So yeah, I mean, that was the moment I sort of realized that this is where I need to be, and this is where my efforts must go. Uh, so even before mooting for policy reforms, legal reforms, and administrative reforms, we must first of all visibilize the discourse on criminal justice. People must know what's happening, and people must know what's the law, uh, and then only we can sort of make an assessment as to where we are and what's happening. Then only we can talk about the reforms. So yes, I mean, it was quite overwhelming, but you only sort of realize what's happening once all of those things are over, and then you have a very lazy day in the court. We
Yeah.
don't have many matters to cover, and that's you think, oh, you remember this happened or remember that happened. So, so yeah, yeah.
That's a quite an interesting take on the need to disseminate information about criminal justice system. Staying on that topic, clearly there isn't much awareness. Forget about the criminal justice system, about laws in general. And another connected area to this, I believe, has to do with the lack of transparency in courts. And in the previous episode, I had Vakasha with me, and I spoke to him about the importance of live tweeting in ensuring transparency in courts. I, there's often a criticism made against live tweeting that it causes the lawyers and the judges to play to the gallery, and there's often a lot of trolling on the internet based on what some judge or some lawyer has said in court. But because you are working in live law, and live law is one of the foremost legal platforms which is involved in this, and of course live tweeting has made courts transparent like no others, otherwise you wouldn't even know what was happening. So what's your take on this, on live tweeting, or especially on a platform where there's so many people, so many young people like Twitter? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I encountered on this larger issue of transparency of courts and transparency of judicial system is I realized that that discourse that is out there and the information that goes out is mostly from the Supreme Court. And I mean, when we talk about legal news or legal discourse, we talk about Supreme Court, and we talk about even like some high courts. Uh, and I mean, it was very apparent in, I mean, you look at how the organizations work. I mean, at Live Law, we only had correspondents in Bombay, Delhi, and Karnataka.
Okay.
When we started out, it was like there are 28 high courts in the country. Not 28 high courts. I mean there are many high courts in the country, but we had only three. Uh, so I think media does carry the burden, responsibility of dissemination of law or dissemination of judicial functioning. But media comes with its own ideology. Media comes with its own purpose. That is, at the end of the day, viewership. And this entire idea of what sells more now than ever, actually. Like now it has become sort of very extremely bad. But yeah, what I was trying to say is that the discourse was heavily dominated by the Supreme Court and some important matters at the High Court. And by important matters, I meant some matters that involved high sounding parties.
Yeah.
So I sort of realized, because I was coming from a law background, I was coming from a legal background, I realized that no, I mean, there are certain cases that involve very fascinating questions of law and very, very important questions of fact, if adjudicated on either of the sides, can lead to a tectonic shift on how we look at legal interpretation. But all of them were getting ignored because the newspapers would only give certain amount of space to legal news,
Right.
and all of that had to be some high sounding matters before the Supreme Court. And I think that's where I realized that my responsibility as the correspondent for the High Court and the trial courts is even more profound, because my responsibility is to highlight what's been extremely invisibilized, and that is the discourse at the trial courts. Um, and I think the first time I went to Tis Hazari, which I don't want to say the kind of words that are being used for
No,
Tis
go
Hazari
on.
court.
Say something
Uh,
scandalous.
uh, uh, so the first time I went to Tis Hazari court, I know actually Tis Hazari court has its own areas which are extremely beautiful and very extremely aesthetic. Especially they have a central foyer where they have all these wooden desks kept, and you
Okay.
can see it from the third floor. It looks very pretty.
Okay.
So very Instagrammable. So when I went to Tis Hazari for the first time, I realized that what I need to highlight is not only the matter that I was there to cover, but also the sociology and the anthropology of that courtroom, of the infrastructure, of how there is access to infrastructure, access to the movement inside the court, who gets to sit on chairs, who gets to sit on the floor, who occupies the courtroom. And you see that all these element of class, caste, gender becomes very, very apparent when you go to a trial court and you see all of these things. So I realized that there is so much to write about. I mean, there is not just when we talk about judicial functioning and judicial transparency, we fail to understand that all of these things also play a role in judicial functioning, judicial transparency. I mean, if I find a court as an intimidating institution, like the architecture, the very architecture of the courtroom, or the very environment or the ecosystem of the courtroom, I find as a litigant very intimidating
Right.
or very unwelcoming
Yeah.
or very unwelcoming. I have already lost my case. I'm already victimized to a larger extent, and that is going to affect my purpose and my commitment towards access to justice, in terms of how we understand justice. So I realized that that part needs to be highlighted, and we need to sort of have a conversation on that. And also you see that that sort of translates into the substantive justice that is being carried out in the trial courts.
Indeed.
uh, Something as simple as uh, something as simple as attendance of the investigating officers. So most of the times, IOs will not come to the hearings, and they will simply say that they got stuck in the line outside the court. There's a huge line; they could not come inside, or they would say that they were busy in some other court which is on the fifth floor, and there's no lift, so they could not come down, and all of those things. So you realize that all of these things also sort of, and then you get a very very long date. And suppose if it's a bail matter, you get a date like 2 weeks later. So now your bail gets postponed for 2 more weeks because of some very stupid administrative lapse that had happened. And even during the VC hearings, I see this left, right, and center, especially in the Karkaduma courts and Tisai courts VC hearings I've been attending. Uh, Lawyers really beg the judge, please give us physical hearing, please give us
Wow.
physical hearings, because the internet connectivity, and I've actually written an article on it and I'll share it with you. The internet connectivity was so bad. It's improving now. I'm talking about 1 or 2 months, when the heart of the lockdown.
Yeah.
And I could see lawyers complaining about that they were waiting and their matter could not come up because there were major technical glitches that were delaying the previous matters. So, I mean, some of the lawyers had to SMS their arguments to the court masters because there was such bad connectivity they couldn't argue. And these raises serious questions about how we look at justice. Justice is not just for the sake of convenience or for recording the orders or to juxtaposing what we see in the context of law and facts. Justice is also sort of look beyond the facts and the law, and to see as to how these extraneous factors are affecting the experience of justice, or how the most socially and economically disadvantaged are thinking of as judiciary, as courts. So when we say that, from childhood we've been hearing that court kacheri ke dhakke khane padenge, court kacheri ke dhakke khane
Yeah.
padenge. So there is a reason, right? The court kacheri mein dhakke hote hain, and these dhakke are as literal as metaphorical. So I think that is something that I believe is an important part of when we talk about judicial transparency and judicial functioning. That I mean, our trial courts, and this is Delhi, this is national capital. So one can only imagine what happens in the trial courts in other states. So all of this, I realize I have an added responsibility. Uh, I did a story on the caste bias in trial courts in Rajasthan, where I realized that how the judicial orders were recording the caste of the litigants, which was completely prohibited by the Rajasthan High Court, and the statue of Manu that stands there. So I think that is an important part of the discourse on judicial accountability and functioning, that we, as a as a as a society, or as even the people in the fraternity obsessed with the drama in the Supreme Court, is sort of not looking at, because it's not serving to the glamour of law. The glamour of law is its power, its verbose, its eloquence, its authority, and its command. And the dirty picture of the trial court sort of never fits into that narrative. uh, and so I think that's why we both, from the media and from the fraternity and from the general public, we are ignoring it, and it is the biggest cause of injustice, I feel, that we are ignoring.
Wow, that's a really, really profound and interesting take. I clearly there's a lot to make sense of
Oh
it
my
from
God, you did
from.
ask me about I'm so sorry.
No, no, no.
I just went on. You asked me about live tweeting. Very briefly, I'll say I think I find live tweeting, I get a lot of anxiety, especially when I think it's 140 characters.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm not sure.
140 characters per day. So it's literally a skill.
Yeah,
As much as I would like to, as much as I would like to believe it's not. I
it
mean,
is.
sometimes
It is.
it's so mechanical. It's so mechanical, like tuck 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 tuck. But I think both me and my colleague from Bar and Bench, Aditi, very good friends. So we sort of always joked about it as to, oh my God, we hate live tweeting, we hate live tweeting. it's, but I think, I think it is, I personally feel, and I think this is an insider view,
Yeah.
is I don't think it captures the courtroom proceedings in its entirety. I mean,
True.
it does carry the seed of sensationalism. It does carry the seed uh, of something being picked up out of the context, and I've seen that happening. And the point is that because I'm live tweeting, I'm not able to respond to the comments that have been made on the tweets and how the tweets have been interpreted. Uh, and sometimes they've been interpreted out of context, and I can't do because I'm still live tweeting. So, um, but you have to realize, I mean, the courts have been so, technically they're the open court, and they're court of record. They're the court of records, and they're the open court. At least the high court is because the court of record. And when we talk about proceedings, they're open proceedings, public proceedings. um, and we talk about documents, right? Even though this entire seal cover business and
Right.
in-camera proceedings are a thing these days, uh, but uh, but yeah, I mean, so we need to answer. We need to ask those questions as to how do we make open courts open, and how do we make public proceedings public. And that's where the idea of live tweeting came. And I think I would love to read up on the history of live tweeting, but I think someone told me that lawyers started doing it.
Oh,
And the
really?
lawyers, yeah, I don't, I hate to confess this, but I don't think the genesis of live tweeting is with the media. I think media sort of, yeah,
Wow.
I think
So
media
that's
sort of
something
took
new.
it. I think lawyers starting. That's what I've been told. Actually, I have not studied it, but the history of live tweeting, I think lawyers started it, and I think it sort of became a rage. Oh my God, this just said that. This just said that. Uh, but yeah, so I think we sort of picked it up. And with live tweeting, you also have to see that one good thing about live tweeting is that you don't actually get much time to refract what you're writing through your own sensibility,
Right.
right? Which you get to do in your reports. When you
Mm.
come back and you submit your story and you submit your report, that is the time where you usually get to reflect, okay, did this just said this, but in this context, and that is, that has its connotative and denotative meaning. But when you're live tweeting, you just say XYZ la 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 and ABC la la la. I mean, you can't possibly tamper with the facts,
Yeah.
or the facts are not that amenable. The facts are not that susceptible to the ideological leaning of the person tweeting. So
Hmm.
that ideological interference uh, sort of reduces, I personally feel, because I don't know. I think apart from live law environments, I don't think anyone does live tweeting.
I don't think so. No. No, no, no.
Or maybe, I mean, I don't know. I've never read.
No, on Twitter, I haven't come
So,
across anyone live tweeting other than Live Law and Bar and Bench.
yeah, so I think both I can tell for myself, and I think if you talk to Aditi, she would probably also say the same thing. Is we don't get time. It's a very mechanical process.
Hmm.
It's because you're dealing with a subject matter which is extremely important, but is also extremely volatile. I mean, if you say something wrong, there are 10 people at you, and you're getting defamation notices
Contempt
and all
even.
contempt and defamation. Luckily, no contempt so far. But I think I've
It's
received
around the
three
corner.
defamations. Or you'll just get a call. I think they don't. Some people don't even reach at that point of time, and they'll just simply call you. Oh, why did you write this? Why did you write it that way? La 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 la. And you're just like,
That happens? Has that
Oh
happened to you?
yes. Oh yes, and you used to take it very seriously in the beginning, and now you're just like very politely ask them to, you know what. Uh, so, yeah, I mean, live tweeting. I personally feel that it's a very dangerous territory in a sense that if not done properly, and if not done with adequate skill and training, can lead to a lot of chaos, can lead to a lot of confusion and things being taken out of context. And especially when you're tweeting sensitive matters on national security, or freedom, or something, individual liberty, matters from the Supreme Court. I have this, I have this, I have this thing against Supreme Court. I don't know why. I don't even know whether it amounts to contempt, but I don't. I just feel that. I mean, I don't feel. Because I feel that the answers to what's going on in the trial courts cannot come from the air-conditioned chambers of the Supreme Court.
True.
Uh, the discourse has to be more decentralized and democratized. But yeah, I mean, it's a very, very responsible taxing also, because I tell you, when we were live tweeting
Hmm.
Chidambaram's matter from Rouse Avenue, it's a very, very small court.
Okay.
It's a very small courtroom. Because it's a magistrate's court. It's a very small courtroom, and it's packed with, first of all, packed with us journalists and other media people. Then it's packed with lawyers. Then it's all the supporters that had come from Tamil Nadu, and all the party workers, then the security, the security personnel. It's I mean, we used to turn up for Chidambaram hearings an hour or 2 hours
Wow.
before.
To find a spot.
Otherwise, we won't. Yeah, we won't get, and you can't sit. I used to tell, Live Law must fund a chiropractor for me because my back is. I can't feel the amount of assault. Yes, either Live Law should fund a chiropractor, Live Law should fund my alcohol. Like anything has to happen because I can't. I have it has been extremely tormenting to my lower back. Uh, Yes, because it's just horrible and you can't breathe, and it's just so, and at the same time, you have to constantly type. And so yeah, I mean, the what I was coming at, that the courts are so crowded, and it's so chaotic. It's very difficult to hear what the judges are saying or what the lawyers are saying, and to sort of put it out. So this is where the legal part of legal journalism helps.
Yeah.
So that's where the formal training in law has, that, I was aware of PMLA. I'm aware of the Prevention of Corruption Act. I know legal jargon, like, prima facie, arbitrary, and qua. Oh my God, I hate, oh my God. This is one word that has created, like, qua and wide and all those things.
Karan, in fact, why don't you place it on record and tell the correct meaning of qua, because I feel it has been misinterpreted for
No,
so
I
long.
don't think so. I think no. I feel I just stop using it.
All
Just
right.
stop using it. I've actually seen judges getting annoyed. I think I don't remember which judge. There was one judge in High Court. And he said, "Would you please stop using qua? Would you please stop using?" So yeah. So I think there were judges who sort of, I've seen judges who sort of frowned upon it. I think it's just time to just say goodbye to certain things. But yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that it is very it is very unnerving, because you have to hear, concentrate, focus at the same time. There cannot be spelling mistakes, there cannot be grammatical errors, and I mean, it's a lot going on in one time, so it's not easy job. I mean, anyone who's reading those live tweets must understand that there is a lot. And I don't know about Supreme Court. Maybe they are sitting in very air conditioned uh, press rooms, or or big courtrooms, but at least at the trial courts, at the high court, it's an extremely difficult job. Also, in the trial courts and high courts, it's much easier for the court masters and the court officials to just shoo you off, like, don't do this, because they think you're clicking a photograph.
I see.
Because even the idea of live tweeting is very new to trial courts also.
Mm.
So they just get very anxious, and so you have to sort of navigate through all of those things. And so live tweeting, if anyone who likes live tweeting, reading live tweets, they must understand there's a lot of effort that goes behind it.
Right.
But at the same, and that's why, that demands responsibility, that demands skill, and certain knowledge in law. But at the same time, I also feel that if given an option, I would not. I would sort of try to end the concept of live tweeting. I think it must go.
Right.
It must go.
I understand. I understand. Karan, you said that you have a friend in Bar and Bench, but outside of that friendship, is there like a rivalry between Live Law and Bar and Bench?
What do you think? I do not wish to comment.
No, no, of course. I
No,
I
I
didn't
mean,
expect.
there's a lot of more than rivalry. I think there's a lot of mutual respect. I mean, Debayan, Aditi, very, very good friend. And actually, they're all very senior to me in the profession. Aditi has been, I think, doing this for quite some time. I think 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. Debayan's quite senior. They both have also worked with mainstream organizations like Mint and the Print.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, I mean, it's they and honestly, they Aditi has been very helpful. Uh, I mean, she's an outright professional. So yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, I in terms of it's like a foot soldiers and the commander sort of a thing. So if you watch any war movie, you would realize that the foot soldiers are not at war with each other. It's the commander in chief. It's the it's the state.
All
So
right.
it's the state. Yeah, but we all there's a and there's a lot of camaraderie, and especially when we were doing Nirbhaya. Nirbhaya was a time when everyone used to turn up. So the camaraderie. That was the only time where you'll see the NDTV journalist having chai with the Times Now journalist. So all of these
Wow.
things especially Patiala. And that sort of made us fall in love with Patiala House. If you go to my Instagram, I have so many like sort of like collections of photos on Patiala House. And I fell in love in Patiala House because of the people and my exposure. So, yeah, I mean,
Wow. That's great. That's great. We are running short of time. I mean, although there's nobody stopping us from going on talking, but we must stop at some point. So I'll just, come
yeah,
to the final bits of the questioning. I've always wondered, and when I told, a couple of my friends that I'll be speaking to Karan, who works with Live Law, they all said, you must ask him, how is it like working in Live Law, like a newsroom for a legal newsroom? How does a regular day at Live Law look? What does a legal journalist do? And that's precisely because there's very little clarity as to what this profession involves within the law school community. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
it's every day is different. I mean, every day is different. There's a lot of running around. I think I lost a lot of weight. I literally lost a lot of weight. So thanks to that. There's a lot of running around. And I'm sort of reminiscing my physical code days.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so, yeah.
I just
uh,
forgot that also
I
happened.
think there's also a lot of preparation. I think one thing that people must know that the job is not just to write. I think writing is not the job. Writing is simply the language, the expression through which you express the job or the subject matter of your job. The subject matter is everything that goes behind that one written piece. And I think my personal experience is that working with live law and I think probably say the same with bar and bench is much, much more taxing and demanding than probably working at mainstream media organization because they can wait. See, the thing with live law is you always have to be live.
Yeah,
So
as
I
the
mean,
name
if you're not
suggests.
live, as the name suggests, if you're not live, then what's the point of being at live law? Uh, so it is definitely, and like any other job, like there are days when you're just like, oh my god, I can't do this. I don't feel like waking up, and there are days where you get exceptional recognition that can't be put into words. I remember when I was actually covering the Delhi rights matter before Justice Muralidhar,
Hmm.
and I come out of the courtroom. It was a packed courtroom. I come out of the courtroom and people like, are you Karan Tripathi? Are you Karan Tripathi? I say, yes, yes, yes. And so we were reading your tweets, we were reading things. Thank you so much, because they could not enter the courtroom, and it was a
Yeah.
very exciting moment for all of them. And then later I realized that the reason why there was so much crowd in that courtroom is because of the tweets. It's because of the information going out that the matter will be taken up by this court, because at that time both of the other DBs were absent.
Ah, I
So
see.
just
Okay.
so Justice Murlidhar was DB3.
Hmm.
The matter had to first come before DB1. The DB1 was not sitting. DB2 was not sitting. So it had to come before DB3. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the moments where I realized what you're doing is extremely important, uh, in terms of, you know, getting access to important, significant moments that have been carried out. Some people told me that it was our coverage of Justice Murlidhar's proceedings that eventually led to his transfer. Uh, but I do not know. I mean, I would like to, as much as I would like to think that it has, uh, I would say that I hope that it did not, because we loved him in our high court. It was sad to see him go, but yes, I mean, and then the other time when my story on Delhi riots then got featured in the New York Times, and the
Wow.
New York Times quoted my article.
That
Then
must have
again,
been
like when my
huge.
yeah, I mean, I was crying, and my mother thought that I got a fit, and I immediately called up my best friend, and I was just like, "We have to meet. We have to meet." It's a huge thing. So yeah, I mean, there are moments which sort of make you feel that what you're doing is bigger than yourself. It's much bigger than who you are. It's part of a larger purpose, which is to sort of visibilize justice and visibilize law, and visibilize how the law and power and identity interacts with each other. And but I think the most fascinating thing about the Delhi rights coverage was also, uh, when I mean that courtroom was packed with lawyers, also because they were so excited to see a high state official or a high state council being held accountable, which is so sad. I mean, as much as it's happy, it's so sad. I mean, state authorities or the officers of the state being questioned and being held accountable for their actions in a courtroom should not be a moment. It should not be an exception. It should be a routine, you know, and especially a court as high as High Court. It should be a
Delhi High
routine
Court.
in those. Yeah, I mean, I should not be surprised if I get to know that court number three is, pulling up Solicitor General, or court number two is, ask the Delhi police to submit CCTV footage and tell why they have not registered the FIRs. This should not come as a surprise. I mean, that's what courts are for, right? For holding the state officials accountable for their responsibilities under the Constitution. But the very fact that Justice Pulida's courtroom was not only packed, but there were constant interruptions of booing and laughter and here, was also a testament of the fact that the reason why that entire event felt very performative is we somehow have lost faith in our judicial forums, or the courts routinely holding state accountable. We had lost faith in that. So when we saw that happening, it was so exciting, so redeeming, uh, and sort of. So I think that is also both happy and sad, and that's when you realize what you're doing is much more bigger than. I always tell my friends a small story from court number 37 of Delhi High Court got published in the New York Times.
Yeah.
So it's much bigger than who you are, and I think if someone's interested in that, if someone's interested in this cause, and sort of uh, using your voice and using your platform in make in drawing the attention towards the judicial discourse that you want to draw to. I mean, I'm interested in criminal justice, but someone who might be interested in financial matters, and someone might be interested in IPR matters. So you can really drive the attention to those issues by using these platforms. And I think I could do that. I tell people I graduated last year, and they're like, "What?
Yeah.
Like seriously?" So I tell them, and And so, yeah, so I mean, I could do that because I had a platform which is, patronized by or which is sort of followed by judges regularly, both judges at the High Court, judges at the
Yeah.
Supreme Court,
Yeah.
by the people in the fraternity. Millions of people read. So I realized that the voice is important and must be utilized in highlighting the causes that one needs to highlight. So I think if one is interested in that, it's a very, very lucrative career. But yes, I mean, it has its days.
Right.
It definitely has its days. It definitely
Yes.
has its days.
Wow. Well, Karan, and this can be perhaps the, one of the final questions that we end with. Clearly, this interview will inspire so many law students to take up legal journalism and, like quit a corporate job altogether, because the way you've been talking about so many issues and the way you're so passionate about them, that really resonates with me, at least, if not with someone else. Well, finally, yours was a very fortunate experience to land a job with Live Law. Your work got recognized and you got called on. But how does someone who does not get recognized become, let's say, a legal journalist? Should they do a degree in journalism, or is an LLB degree fine to be a legal journalist? What's the process like? What do you think should someone who wants to be a legal journalist do?
I think there is one area of legal journalism that I sort of discovered little late, like in 20 later part, post Nirbhaya, uh, mostly during the lockdown, is investigative legal journalism, is where you use your skills of researching, of empirical research, and you then use your research to curate stories and pieces that are extremely, extremely important. So my research on prisons and my research on probation officers that I did under the guidance of Professor Vijay Raghavan of Tata Institute of Social Sciences,
Wow.
Criminology Department. Uh, it really, really helped me in looking at this profession very differently. So I realized that legal journalism is not just about court reporting and writing about what's happening in courts, but it's also about using your platform and using the accessibility of a journalistic platform or a media platform to push narratives which are much more research based and empirical and highlight what's happening on ground. So if you read my articles written on prisons and carceral experience of prisoners serving life sentence, I've been interviewing prisoners for 4 months now. These are the prisoners been sentenced to life in Delhi, and they were all sentenced while they were young adults. So they were basically asked to serve a sentence much more than they have actually lived so far. So my fascinating narratives have appeared, and I've written about them. So I think so. Sort of investigative legal journalism would involve using your research skills, using your academic background, using your legal background to produce works that are academic in nature, but at the same time accessible to public at large, because you've been disseminating them through your portal and your platform and using your voice to draw the attention there. So my purpose has been now to take the attention to the prisons, which have been extremely invisibilized. Discourse on prisons have been extremely invisibilized. So what I've been doing for the past few weeks and I think past few months now is to sort of dedicate my time in doing research on prisons and writing stories to draw attention uh, to what's been happening inside our prisons. And I think once as I said in the beginning of my talk, that it's when we talk about reforms, we first need to talk about disseminating information. Like, people must know such things exist. Otherwise, they will never be able to identify with the cause. So empathy. I mean, existence sort of precedes empathy. So I need to believe in the existence of something for me to empathize. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I believe that my stories on prisons are not based on structural assessment or structural audit of prisons. क्या अच्छा ठीक है toilet नहीं है या overcrowding है, but the story is more about how prisoners feel about the prison. So it's what we call the carceral experience of pains of imprisonment. So the prisoners themselves are telling the narratives of their pains of imprisonment, and that should be an important data to sort of work on the reforms on prisons and the criminal justice system. So that has been my orientation, and I'm sort of exploring it more now. and moving more towards that side. So I think that's also one thing that law students can explore straight away, is how to find uh, a combination of research uh, and, and journalistic work, and create robust stories and robust long form articles which are academic in nature and which are extremely very well researched.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's one more thing that the law students right now can explore.
Right. Well, before we end, I must mention to our viewers that due to a paucity of time, there's so much that I couldn't possibly cover, but I wanted to cover. And I'm so glad Karan mentioned his research on prisons. There's a recent article that Karan wrote about the experiences of queer people in Delhi prisons. And I will link that article below in the description section. And I do suggest that everyone reads it. It's an eye opener. By the end of it, I had tears in my eyes, and I mean, I should say that it's that moving. And yes,
Thank
of course. And some of the other investigative work done by Karan must be read, and I'll be sure to link all the articles that I've found fascinating in the description section. And you must realize that I can't possibly cover everything in like 50 minutes. And Karan, you'll be surprised to know that people don't like to watch videos which have like a more than 20-minute length. So while the intention is always to
Oh yeah.
end the video before 30 minutes, but of course it does stretch on. And I don't like to edit videos. And I think everything that you've said is worth putting out. Everything all the guests say is worth putting out. And viewers,
My
you
mama's
can
gonna be so proud. My mother's gonna be finally something to impress my mother. She thinks that she's not at all happy with me. So I'm so happy
oh
that
god.
something to impress her with.
Well, no,
I
of
hope
course
so.
it's not just some people. It's a lot of people. In fact, I became aware of your work through
Very
friends
kind of you.
who had become aware of your work through friends. So clearly there's a lot of, "Hey, you should have you read this article? Have
A
you
lot of
read that?"
friend marketing. A lot of friend
Yes.
marketing.
Yes. Well,
Love it.
Karan, finally, with this, we can conclude. Thank you so
Yes,
much for
thank you.
coming to Letter of Law. It was a pleasure to have you on board.
It was a pleasure, and all the best with the coming episodes. And I hope that Letter of Law sort of becomes, it's a very, very good space for us to talk about what's happening in our lives and the kind of work we are doing,
Yes.
and in a very informal way. So I think it's so important for us as well. So I wish you all the best for your future episodes, and I hope this really, really goes ahead. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Karan.